Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, Being Benevolent to Your Beneficiaries, part 2 in our series on end of the year charitable gift strategies with attorney Les Raatz. Welcome to the second segment, Les.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, we're giving today, happy holidays to you, all right? Now, here's a premise, and I was a young agent when this happened. Person said, Steve, I have Anheuser-Busch stock. I've been giving it to it, that my dad gave it to me years ago. I said, well, how many years ago? It was like 35 years ago. That stock is huge. And he says, I've been thinking about taking a little off the table. I said, well, there's not going to be much basis here, so get ready to pay. And that was back in the day where there's a lot of ramifications, tax ramifications. He says, but I was thinking about giving it to a charity. And I said, well, that's great. Why don't you, which one do you have? And he named it. And we said, that's fine. You can do that. And at the time, I was not licensed to sell stocks individually. So he waited. I went up in Chicago, got my test. He waited 3 or 4 weeks till I got my exams. So I come and I sold off his position, did everything he wanted me to do. This charity's happy, father's happy, and I get a nasty call from his beneficiary sons and daughters. Now, we want to be benevolent, but sometimes we need to clue our beneficiaries on the activity of what we're doing, especially if my mom and dad are kind of old and we've got to make sure they're making quality decisions at their age group. When you look at this, how much asset replacement? I know you do a lot of gifting, but what about asset replacement? I just gave this away. Is there something to replace this with?
Well, the issue on who to leave your wealth to, is a personal issue. And sometimes the children are going to have naturally sort of anxiety if that issue comes up as just a general rule. But there are ways, and let's take, say a wealthier client who does want to make charitable contributions, and can there be an efficient way to do that where, based on tax law, you may end up being able to make that charitable contribution and, in effect, not really deplete the estate for your beneficiaries. Could be children or descendants. So there are techniques for that. You run the numbers, you show the examples, and it may well be that you can get there from here through, say, replacement life insurance, other sorts of things.
Now, I noticed because we're doing what I'm about to say is in the backdrop of the greatest mortality revolution we've ever known as mankind. We are living longer. We just are. I've noticed that I can replace an asset almost, especially if mom and dad are decently healthy, almost 5-to-1 ratio of second to die, where you put 2 people on 1 contract. I gave away $1 million. I'm now going to try to replace that $1 million with a second to die contract. When we first came out with it in 1990, I think it was for 65-year-old, both male, female, preferred. That was $26,000 guaranteed. Today, that's $8,000. Think of the same contract is $8,000. That's how much the mortality revolution is impacting death claims. So, my question to you, though, as an attorney, not as a life insurance person, Les, under the unified credit, do I need to have an irrevocable life insurance trust to park this replacement life insurance in? Or if I'm under the unified credit, do I have to deal with this at all? Is it worth looking at this?
Well, that's a legitimate question. Let's take, for example, we know there's a $5.5 million federal estate tax exemption per person. So a husband and wife essentially can shelter $11 million today. Under the Trump bill, even the Senate or the I should say the tax bill, because they vary, the exemption will double to be $11 million per person, which would be $22 million per family member. So the answer is it may not be necessary to go through the gyration to try to have that replacement life insurance not be removed from the estate, because there was no need to try to get it out of a taxable estate. So the replacement could be a pretty simple process.
All right, but just to make sure we cover this, I've noticed that the federal tax code on estate planning is not the same, and it's not the same on state level. So if I am okay on the Fed level, I'm under the unified credit, if I've understood you correctly. What about the state level? I'm thinking California, Illinois, New York. These are some big tax states. Would your answer still be the same?
Well, no. Many states do not have an estate tax, but many states out east especially do have an estate tax, and also the state of Washington. California does not yet. But taking that into account and the fact that it might reach even a marginal rate into the high teens, then you look at the exemptions applicable in those states, and you may find that you end up with it being dinged possibly, what nets to be a fifth of the insurance cost, even though you're not going to be subjected to federal estate tax. So the same reason to place it in trust is going to be now a state tax question. So that is a very good point.
Well, I'm just going to remind all our consumers, remember, whatever state you're watching this in, and we have a whole list of these states and what's exempt and what isn't at transfer and asset transfer to the next generation. You need to be heads up on this because this could be, I hate to sit there and walk out here and say, I don't need to spend the attorney money on this. I'm under the unified, on the federal level, you might be under the unified gift. But what about the state? And remember, every state's different and you have to find out. We're in a very good state. And I'm glad to be there, and I'm glad that we're broadcasting in December with 72 degrees. So let's talk about, And then, there's life insurance. I want to get to the part where I have no money. I have a big heart, small wallet. And I just told you that the ratio, if I have a very healthy male and female 65-year-old on a survivorship, which is 2 lives on 1 contract, I all of a sudden become a player. I can become a giver, and a substantial one. So I, who don't have 6 figures to give away, could do this. Is there any rules of engagement on existing contracts and gifting it versus buying a brand new contract and gifting it?
Well, yes, there are. Normally, you can make a gift of any property to, child, to anybody you like, and then if to the extent of federal estate tax issues or state estate tax issues, it's out of your estate. Now, some states impose a gift tax. Minnesota, I think, is one of them, but those are the outliers, okay? So the answer is typically you can make a gift and you don't have to worry about it being part of your estate. But as you're getting to, and this is a good point, life insurance along with certain other, say, trust-held assets, you can give it away, but if you own the policy and you die within 3 years of that gift, then that policy face value is includable in your estate, or may well be includable.
Okay, can I back up for just a second?
Sure.
All right, now the 3-year rule would only be applicable if I'd owed federal and or state taxes, right?
Well, yes, that's true, because even though it's included in the estate for purposes of federal estate tax computation, it doesn't mean you're going to pay an estate tax. It means it's added to it. Sure. So if you're still under the exemption amount with that inclusion, then it didn't create any detriment in all likelihood.
Life
other
insurance,
than maybe the state issue, as you pointed out.
Right. Yeah. Life insurance is personal property. I can gift any of our, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're saying I could pretty much take my personal property I own and gift it as I see fit.
Well, that's a general statement, and that's true. Now, states where there are marital asset laws and also community property states, persons are permitted to make gifts away, but at some point it may cross a line where it's deemed to be waste or say, just a diminution of a community property. So there are, limits of excess in those marital areas potentially.
All right, now if I'm in a big East Coast state tax, the 3-year rule it might affect some things on the federal level, probably not as much unless you got serious wealth, but it could still on the state level for what I would call an affluent middle class or upper middle class. So my question is, the 3-year rule comes back. Is there any way to defend against that?
Well, there are actually a couple ways. One is if you don't already own the policy, then if you gift money to someone to make that premium payment or actually acquire that policy, then you didn't transfer the life insurance, and it won't be includable under those estate string provisions.
So am I hearing you that it might be a little cleaner if you can pass the physical exams under underwriting, look at the pricing, make sure it's a good price. Maybe it's better to start from ground zero on this, gift the premium, not the policy, and let the policy be owned, day one from the charity?
Yes. You've never owned the policy for that matter. And so that would be the idea to get around those various code sections that are out there for federal estate taxes that pull assets in your state even though you don't own those assets.
Well, just a heads up, just remember, as a regular person like I am, listen, if you're going to give money to a charity to buy life insurance, which is it's a poor man's way to give a lot of money. It's great. But keep in mind, we still have to do financial justification with the carrier. So if you've never done any business with these guys, don't be surprised if you get a little pushback from underwriting because you've never had a history with this charity. I've noticed that justification is a lot better when you have history with the charity you've been giving to them. You have a relationship, maybe it's the church you go to. Just heads up, be careful in advance before you go through underwriting. Make sure they know what you're trying to get done so that you can do this without a hassle. I've seen time and again certain carriers are not as benevolent.
Well, yes, and if it's you were going to make a life insurance gift to a charity, even whether you gave it away or you named it as a beneficiary, maybe you are under that 3-year rule. Maybe it is includable in your estate, but maybe because it went to the charity, you would end up with a charitable deduction for that gift anyway, so it still zeroes out. So there's still not necessarily just all bad news at the end of the rainbow. There's a lot of different potential permutations to that you can say, well, there may be an inclusion, but I still don't have to worry about an increased tax.
Well, I like all the options. That's the biggest part. Don't forget to watch our next segment on the tax advantages of giving, part 3 in our series on end of the year charitable giving strategies. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, or financial advisor. You've been watching Steve Savant's Money.